Right, good morning everybody. We'll look to start the Economic Growth Committee meeting this morning for the 28th of February. Welcome everybody today. I'd like to hand over to the Deputy Mayor to start this morning.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair, and also officers and councillors and the public. Tū tawa mai I runga, tū tawa mai I raro, tū tawa mai I roto, tū tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Tēnā koutou.
Tēnā koutou. I'd like to explain that the meeting has been recorded and that we're being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Just want to put up the fire and emergency. So if we do have a fire, we will go through the emergency exits, which are well signposted, and Sina will take us out calmly out of the building. Thank you, Sina. And if we need a defibrillator, it's also positioned out in the links span. I just lost the word, link span, and Sina will also help us with that, so thank you, Sina, for that. Moving on, all participants, if they're online, to keep their cameras on, thank you for that, and their microphones are to be muted, and we've got 6 councillors, 6 or 5? 6 councillors online today, and so sorry, 5, and then all councillors in person are to be, basically let us know that you, devices, that's just to let us know if you have a question. And if you've got an amendment for those online, please text it through to the administrator. Right, we'll put forward for apologies. Councillor Johnson is for late arrival. Any other apologies? No, I'll look forward to put that to the vote. Seconded by Councillor Wood. If we can look to vote for that, please. That's carried 14 votes for. Thank you. We will go a little bit slow today with the 5 councillors on, so just bear with us. Next is notification of additional items. I haven't had any, so have anybody got any additional items today? No. The next is declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? I haven't heard of any. No. And the next item is public comment. I haven't got any public comment. No. Before I go into the confirmation of minutes, I just want to introduce a new member of staff, which is Mr. Glenn O'Connor. If you want to stand up, he's in the transport team. He started, I don't know what day you started. Monday, so welcome to the team and the transport team. We welcome you to the team, so thank you for starting. Hope you have a long, and so does Chris. Chris hopes the same thing. Welcome aboard. Right, we'll now start with the minutes. So the first lot, so we've got 5 councillors online, so I'll just name who they are. We have Councillor Bowen, Meehan, Mickelard, Hancock and Zebulon, just so that you're all aware of those councillors that are online today. Thank you. Sorry, jumping around a bit. We've got confirmation of the minutes for the 25th of October 2023. Seems such a long time ago, so we'll look to those minutes which are on page 7. So I'll look to move those minutes. Has anybody got anything they'd like to object to those minutes today? I'll move them, and seconded by Councillor Wood. And we'll look to vote. That's passed with 12 votes for and 2 abstentions. Thanks, everybody. Now look to the second lot of minutes, which is on page 13. And this is for the extraordinary meeting on 15th of February. Anybody, I'll look to move those, Councillor Wood will look to move those minutes, and I'll look to second them. Anybody got any comments on those minutes? Page 13 of your papers. No, we'll look to vote. That's passed with 11 votes for and 3 abstentions. Thanks for that, everybody. Now we'll look through item number 8, which is on page 23 of your papers, and we're looking to Bryce to come forward. This is the Pioneer Highway signalised dual crossing. So, thank you, Bryce. If you could run us through this paper. Over to you, Bryce.
Kia ora, councillors. Well, as rightfully was introduced, our new Group Manager of Transport, Glenn O'Connor. So I thought it would be a bit rough to get him to present a report on day 3. So I thought I'd better front up and present this one. And in reality, I'll probably stay involved in some of the matters over the next month or so, and maybe reporting transport papers from time to time, just as Glenn gets his feet under the desk. This is, I guess, a follow-up from when we presented about where the location of the bus shelter and stop was going to go on Pioneer Highway in relation to this crossing. So right back in February 2023, there was a paper presented to this committee around the location of and how we were going to be giving effect to the shared cycleway pathway and also the separated cycleway on Main Street South. You'll remember the planter boxes. I won't dwell on those. It was that decision. And then as part of that, there was also the positioning of a crossing outside the shopping centre. There was there was a decision to be made really around the right turn out of the shopping centre and whether that was to be retained or not. And you'll notice through this paper, whilst it is in relation to the crossing itself and in particular the location of it, really the decision is whether you wish to retain that turn or not. So we have a couple of options that we've included in the appendices of locations. I mean, in reality, they're probably only a matter of metres down the road slightly, but that basically is the difference between being able to retain that right turn or not. Have tried to include quite a bit of the sort of safety background, which I guess was is the compelling argument for stopping the right turn. We've done that on pretty much all of the other turns in this stretch of road. And that really would be a compelling case to do that here again. Equally, including a lot of the specific feedback from the businesses and the consideration around what removing a right turn might mean for them. And that probably very firmly sits in the other opposing argument about shifting the crossing a few metres down the road and retaining that right turn. So happy to take any questions on this as we go through. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Bryce. We'll start off with Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bryce. Couple questions. The paper refers to a significant crash history. Those are the words in the paper. Could you give us some numbers around that or just some information to help us understand what you mean by significant crash history?
I don't know the exact number of crashes immediately to hand, but it was a considerable amount. in truth, there wasn't a significantly high number of death and serious injuries, but there was a number of crashes. And importantly, the Safe Systems audit as well identified a number of those were simply a result of people trying to turn right, misjudging traffic coming, getting clipped. It's not particularly obvious given you essentially you'd be turning over multiple lanes of road. You were putting yourself in a bit of an awkward position trying to merge in with traffic, and a lot of the crashes in the area in an immediate sense were interrelated to that. I could get you the exact number, but it was a relatively high number in comparison to, say, some of our other stretches of road in the city.
Great, thanks. And so the warehouse and Pioneer New World and those kind of things, you can't get a right-hand turn out of there, is that the case?
Correct.
Right, okay.
Pretty much every right turn on that strip of road between Botanical and right down to the following intersection have been stopped. This is the only one that's still in place.
Thank you. And has this been through the design panel?
Absolutely, yes. So the crossing itself and the options put in front of you have gone through the design panel. They were also the ones who undertook some of the safety assessment work as well as part of that, so we could get a consolidated response for you.
And the panel's view between the two options?
As many traffic engineers tend to orientate towards, their view really dwelled towards safety, and their recommendation to us was to stop the right turn because of those reasons. Probably not an entirely surprising view from a traffic engineering standpoint, as that's their bread and butter stuff.
Thank you. How many people actually drive by the site?
Good question. A lot. We took note of the amount of businesses coming into the shopping centre itself in terms of an actual road count alongside just simply driving down that stretch of road. I don't have that to hand, sorry. Sorry, that's probably a bit of an omission. I should have had that one on the top of my head.
Thank you. Just one further question, I think, at this stage, Madam Chair. Just interested in the right-hand turn and whether between option 1 and 2, it's a perceived difference of convenience or whether there's an actual difference of convenience.
Also a good question. The viewpoint of, in particular, the 3 biggest businesses in the shopping centre was that it would be an inconvenience and it would potentially have an impact on their business, or at least that was the concern. Whether that is simply perceived or a reality, I guess it would be difficult to know until we've actually built it, and whether that stop actually was stopped or not. I can understand their point of view, and as I said, to be fair, a lot of people do currently turn right out of there, hence also the crash data, so they sort of go a bit hand in hand supporting each other, ironically. But it is a perception of those businesses. I guess importantly, it wasn't shared necessarily by all of the businesses in that shopping centre. Some were a lot more open to the idea of it being stopped.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We've got a lot of questions, so I've got probably 7 people asking questions, so let's try and keep the questions. Let's now go to Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Only 3 questions from me. My first one follows up on what Councillor Barrett was asking about. So on page 29, under point 6.2, it says, this is evident in the crash reports and site observations, see section 3. I'm just wondering if the crash reports are missing from section 3 as they don't appear to be there. And there doesn't appear to be any evidence as to the level of crashes, numbers, 10-year periods, anything for us to make a decision off in regards to crash data other than one comment that says that there have been crashes.
Yeah, apologies. We do have a pretty comprehensive report that I think has been omitted from this in terms of specific details.
Can Michael provide it?
I might be able to provide you some. Here we go. Here's a report I prepared earlier, or rather Michael did. So in terms of the intersection itself, we've had 0 fatal, 2 serious injuries. but all up we've had 84 crashes directly outside that location where we're talking about the right-hand turn,
Over a 10-year period or 5-year period?
over a 10-year period.
Thank
So
you.
from 2014 to late 2023.
Appreciate that. My next question is, couldn't we then make it safer if we're doing a new design for there to be space for people to make a right-hand turn, sit in the median and then merge into that lane? Given we're recognising that there has been crashes there, could we take this opportunity through the design to make it safer rather than retaining the status quo?
That was an early consideration. I guess in terms of putting the crossing across, that becomes a little bit challenging in terms of that bay and how that could work. Observations in the past when we've had these kind of conversations is we tend to put that infrastructure in place. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't in terms of merge bays. If you consider a completely different situation, but the merge bay, say in Fielding, as you're exiting, heading towards Palmerston North, there's a merge if you've just crossed over the railway line and heading towards there. I live in Fielding, for instance, and at least every second person doesn't really understand how it works, and people pull out or stop or cause all sorts of issues in that intersection.
Fair observation, I've seen the same. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bryce. Bryce, there's quite a bit of mention from the majority of the respondents in the consultation notes around a preference for signalised intersection at West Lyndhurst. Has there been any discussions or collaboration of officers prior to consultation, during, because it didn't come to the earlier meeting?
This was a matter that got investigated at the time when the right turn was actually stopped at that intersection, as I understand it, so well before I was sitting in this seat. I understand it was a pretty complex and pretty costly exercise. You're crossing over multiple lanes of road. The two roads on both sides don't line up. There was a number of complexities in there, and I understand it was deemed at the time to be relatively cost prohibitive in terms of actually doing it. In terms of this piece of work, no, it wasn't reconsidered as part of this. Only really the focus on the crossing and the turn was.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Bryce. Just a couple of questions, please. Page 27, 3.2, the first point about vehicle counts. How many days did that happen? Was that, and how many hours were vehicles counted for, please?
Absolutely. They did it on multiple times in a day, over a couple of days of within a week period, a couple of different days, different times, day in the morning, afternoon, and really a bit of an average in terms of how they came to those numbers.
Okay, thank you for that. My other question would be, yeah, it's great to see all businesses were consulted with. Was the town owners and the property manager, were they part of that?
Where possible, they were. In some cases, that wasn't possible. In particular, we took a real focus on the businesses operating out of there, who obviously it's their client base and those things. In some cases, we had a property manager, for instance, more locally looking after it, which we spoke to as well. So probably the simplest answer is, in some cases, yes, in some cases, no.
So the building owner?
Not always, no.
No. Okay, thank you.
We'll just go online to Councillor Bowen. Bowen, can you start again and unmute? Still muted. Sorry, start one more time, Councillor Bowen. One more time. Go.
Hello?
Yep, that's it. Go.
Yes, good. Thank you. Following up on Councillor Arnott's question to start, and you've covered how that was measured. I'm just interested in that comparison between the feedback from, I think, the bakery, that they thought there was about 500 right turns a day, and the officer's report says around 30 an hour. So can I seek a comment on whether that is the same thing, or how does that compare?
The bakery, the bakery was an interesting one because some of their clientele park on the roadside. They don't all go into the actually into the car park itself. They also tend to get a number of walk-up people. So comparing that data proves to be a little bit challenging when you're dealing with business to business because they're not all coming from the same place to actually visit their store. They have a good gauge of the foot traffic and people actually coming into their store, but whether they all drove there or came from another means is very difficult to determine.
So do you think 500 right turns a day is about right, a bit high? What's your feel on that?
Never really one to give my feel, but it probably seems about right, I would say, based on the data our consultants observed.
Lovely, thanks, Bryce. And my other question was just about the request for additional car parking markings in the West Street kind of road reserve space. Is that being considered as part of this proposal?
It hasn't been directly considered as part of this. However, that comment and those comments were taken on board, and I think there's something we can consider on how we might be able to give effect to that.
So you wouldn't need an additional recommendation for that. It can just be taken as part of ongoing work.
Correct. I think that's just a relatively operational matter from a transport perspective.
Thank you. No more questions. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Bond. Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Am I heard all right?
Yes, you're fine.
Thank you. Bryce, so if we take out the right-hand turn, the person wishing to travel back into town, what would be their route to get back up towards Main Street?
Essentially, well, from I guess, best practice point of view, they would be required to turn down a side street and essentially block it back, whether that be down, is it Shamrock? Heading onto Cuba and heading back that way, or they could go the alternative way. There was a concern, as I hopefully be reflected through the paper here, that it could result in some people doing U-turns. Well, I'll, even though I said I don't really like to give a feel, I'll give a feel now. I think that probably is a reality, as that's what some road users will do. And that in itself does create some safety concerns. I would suggest it will be a considerably reduced number from the amount of people turning right out of directly right, doing U-turns, but it is a consideration for councillors.
Thank you, Bryce, because that was my next question. That would you consider that's what people revert to doing, is doing right-hand turns? Thank you.
Thank you for that comment question. Last one online, which is Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, just a question. Thanks, Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, I will confine my comments to a question. Bryce, just picking up on Councillor Meehan's point there, would people not actually turn left again into Botanical, left into Church, and then use Cook Street?
Yes, so I referred to they could go the other way. That is the alternative route they could take, yes. So essentially they would either head back towards town via Church Street or Cuba Street and have to get back directly to the square, I'd say, is the most tangible blocks they would take.
And once they got to the intersection of Cook and Pioneer, that gives them all options in terms of direction, yes?
Apologies, Councillor, can you just repeat that question?
Yeah, so once they get back to the intersection of Cook and Pioneer, that then gives them all options in terms of direction. Would that be correct?
No. So that right turn has already been removed, the one out sort of between the warehouse and the Pioneer Shopping Centre, you already can't turn right there, you have to turn left. So essentially, if they wanted to head back towards the square, they'd have to continue down Cuba or Church, further down next block over.
No, sorry, I think you've misunderstood. I think Cook and Pioneer is actually a
Cook and Pioneer,
controlled
apologies, yes,
intersection.
where the lights are, confusing my streets. Yes, correct, that's all signalised light crossing, so yes, they would be able to interact and head back exactly the way they would, correct.
Whichever way they wanted to at that point.
Correct.
Thank you, Bryce. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Back in the chamber, we've got the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let's get to my notes. Thanks. Two questions, really around some of the commentary from the three biggest retailers. Have officers explored that road reserve, because they identify that as just a great big, I suppose, drive-through. Is there any plans to do anything with that, or is that another topic, another issue?
I'd suggest it's probably another topic and another issue. It has been like that for some time. It is the main entrance into that car park. At least somewhere in the respondents, they did talk about turning some of that into car parking, for instance, and those things I suggest would need to be considered.
Right, okay. And in their commentary, they're just a little bit worried about construction fatigue for customers. Any idea when they're earthquake strengthening that shopping centre, or is a conversation yet to be had?
Yeah, no apologies. I'm not sure of that timeline.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Finally, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and apologies for lateness. So if this has been covered, I apologise. But once someone is parked in the West End Shops car park and they want to head into town, there's nothing to stop them exiting out the back of the car park and turning right into West Street and then left into Church, is there?
Correct. They can do that.
So I guess I'm struggling to understand the concern that people would not use the shopping centre because they wouldn't be able to continue their journey into town. So someone who's coming from out of town, say, who turns right into the shopping centre, they'd still be able to do that, would they, under this scenario?
Correct.
They'd be able to turn right in, and then they'd be able to exit out the back and continue into town that way.
Correct.
So are you able to explain to us why there's a concern that people wouldn't use the shopping centre then if they were on their way into town?
Probably the best comment I could provide is a similar one from earlier around that is a perceived concern from the businesses or some of the businesses in the shopping centre, that it may inconvenience their customers, which may have a detrimental effect on their business. Whether that was ever realised or not is difficult to ascertain until we've actually built the crossing.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's all the questions we've got for you today. Thank you. Right, we're going to look to move a recommendation, and I'm going to look to Councillor Wood to move it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And fear of attracting the ire of some of my colleagues, I'm going to move that we, and I apologise, I'll get the wording up here, agree option 2 and construct the signalised crossing as described in attachment 3, noting this will continue to allow a right-hand turn exit from the shopping centre. I'll look to the floor for a seconder.
Yeah.
Councillor Arnott. And I'll speak briefly to this, if that's all right, Madam Chair. Look, I understand the concern from colleagues that the main drive behind this, 3 major businesses on this centre oppose it, and actually if you look at the report, of the 8 businesses there, 1's neutral, 2 on-site supported and 5 on-site oppose it. These are people who live and breathe this shopping centre, they operate in it every day. The officer said, oh, well, you know, potentially Pioneer Bakery wouldn't know how many cars are using it because a lot of their people would be foot traffic. Well, they exist on the corner of that site, so whether they're visiting their business or not, they see all of the traffic movements in and out of that location. And the officer confirmed that their assumption of around 500 people a day using that right-hand turn would be about right. So we're talking about 25% of the traffic flow out of that shopping centre utilising that turn. I asked my questions whether there was an opportunity to make that turn safer, recognising that there has been a history of accidents at that location, and the answer from officers was it was considered and there is some potential there, whether we looked at a median or some other form of safety improvement. I am of the view that potentially there is an opportunity here, if we do agree with this, noting that it says in the report that the detailed design would then need to be done for construction from what's been presented to us in attachment 3, that there may be an opportunity to make some modest safety improvements to that location. It's a well-established and well-known option for people, and I think it is a fair concern that's been raised around people taking a U-turn who have to stop in the middle of Pioneer Highway to then make that U-turn from Shamrock Street, which would likely cause more accidents. As the officer said, we don't know until we try, and so it is a case of we're not working with exceptionally good data here. We're having to make a call based on predictions of what we think may happen. The crash numbers that have been given to us, it was noted that there have been no fatal crashes, 2 serious and 84 other crashes over a 10-year period, noting that not all of those relate specifically to the right-hand turn bay. I think at the end of the day, given we've got the vast majority of the businesses on site in support of retaining the right-hand turn and reasonably low risk of retaining it, then I see no reason why we wouldn't give the business community which operates out of that centre what they want and allow their customers to continue to operate there. I lived across the road from that shopping centre for many years, so I know that area very well, and I am very comfortable making this proposal, so interested to see where the room is.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't support this. The reason being, in the last 2 weeks, I've seen 3 close accidents in that one spot. I regularly go to that shopping centre, and I've seen one I thought was going to be a major accident. It's only the fast work on the person coming down Pioneer Highway that stopped what could have been a catastrophe. People just don't look, and they shoot across, and I never ever turn right there because I've seen so many accidents or so near accidents. I usually either go out the bottom or I go up the road and turn it Botanical. I can't support it because I've actually seen so many close accidents. So I will vote against it. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues. Like Councillor Finlay, having listened to the arguments presented, not in a position to support what Councillor Wood's hoping to achieve here. My read of the paper and having spent a bit of time observing that location as well is that there is a clear case around option 1 actually providing us the best outcomes for the most people here. We've heard a tremendous amount from, a few hundred people or a few businesses interested in a few hundred people wanting to turn right. There's thousands, several thousand people. We didn't get the exact number from officers, unfortunately, but there's thousands of people up and down that road every day, and we need to think about what's in the best interest of the thousands of road users, as well as those who choose to do their shopping here. And from both a safety of travel and ease of travel point of view for those people going up and down Pioneer Highway to get to all parts of the city and all parts of the network, option 1 is going to give us a much better outcome than we would with option 2. Gives us as well, obviously, a safety dividend for those entering and exiting the car park. The other comment I wanted to make is that I'm not convinced that kind of design by committee is actually serving the best interests of this community. We've got a design panel for a reason. They make recommendations for a reason. And when we get to kind of kicking it around this room, quite often we end up with anecdotes or just things that, aren't even the case. So Councillor Wood, in moving this, indicated that somebody turning into Shamrock Street would need to stop in Pioneer Highway in the lane to turn. Well, there's actually a right-hand turn bay there which would accommodate that. And it's not so much to pick on that particular point, it's that, we all kind of have a slightly different view and recollection and idea about the details of an intersection. And that's why we have design panels to actually look at things in detail and bring us clear recommendations. So I'm not convinced that design by committee is great in the first instance. And the other thing I'd say is that if we are going to choose that the best use of our time here is to design by committee, we need to make sure that we're hearing from everyone. And I do feel like we've handed 3 individuals who do happen to manage businesses a megaphone, and we haven't really listened to all the other road users. We haven't listened to the residents in the area, etc. So if we are going to move into a future where we decide that every detailed traffic decision is a committee decision, then we need to make sure that we are listening to everyone, not just less than 5. Thank you.
So, councillor, if this fails, will you move option 1B?
I'd be happy to, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just put my opinion forward. I'm happy to go with this option, and I think the reason that I am happy to support this is because it has come forward from the businesses that are wanting to support it, that are in that, and the officers did canvass all of the businesses. Some of them didn't put an opinion forward, but those that did put it forward did support it, so that's why I'm happy to support it. We'll go to the next one on the list, which is the Deputy Mayor.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. I'd oppose this option for the fact that 8.6 crashes on average per year is 8.6 crashes too much. A right-hand turn is inconsistent with the current status along Pioneer Highway, and therefore if we change or make an exception, then it could cause confusion for motorists. There are mixed views, some for, some against. And as Councillor Barrett had mentioned, it's not just the businesses. This is an arterial road, nearby schools, and there's a nearby school, Our Lady of Lourdes. There's a childcare centre. It's quite built up residentially, and that would impact everyone. Not to mention those using that road on a day-to-day basis. Exiting via West Street and a left-hand turn into Church Street is a genuine option and seems very simple from my mind. I know this road well, and also that shopping centre. I'm probably there every second day. Safety would be a paramount concern for me. Kia ora. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm not going to be supporting this, and happy to second Councillor Barrett's option 1, should it fail. I think this is about what you prioritise. And I would prefer to prioritise safety over everything else. And to me, it just makes no sense to turn right out of that shopping centre across several lines of traffic onto Pioneer Highway. Apart from the safety risks, you'd be waiting a long time to take that turn. Councillors will remember in the previous term when I was responsible for buying fruit for the morning tea, and every Wednesday morning I came in and turned right from Pioneer Highway into West Street Shops, bought the fruit at Tea Market Fresh, and went out onto West Street and along Church Street. And that's by far the most sensible exit from that shopping centre. West Street is not so busy, it's easy to turn right onto, and then you're straight into a route into town. So I'm not convinced by the arguments from businesses that shoppers would be deterred from using their businesses if there was no right turn. I actually think it would make life a lot simpler getting in and out of that shopping centre, which is a little bit tight, to be quite honest, in terms of the, the space that you've got to drive in and drive out. A one-way sort of flow through that shopping centre would make life a lot easier, and I just don't see the issue with changing it so that there's no right turn exit. So ultimately, I think this is about what you prioritise. Are you going to prioritise the safety concerns and consistency along Pioneer Highway to make sure that everybody that uses that intersection is as safe as possible, or is it about perceived concerns from businesses which actually may or may not transpire? So it's not a difficult decision for me. Thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we know, humans are creatures of habit, and losing another right-hand turn will certainly cost all these businesses dearly in turnover, and to me that's unnecessary, unacceptable and avoidable. The other entry-exit to this complex, as we know, West Street, beside the warehouse, is also no right-hand turn, and it's a heck of a long way around the block, councillors. I can clearly see four things happening here. Either people won't take any notice and will turn right anyway, or they'll go left, do a U-turn in the middle of Pioneer Highway, or go into the Mobile petrol station and go in and out. Or the fourth option, they'll just go somewhere else, and that's what will happen. Without a doubt, turnover will be affected, and it's totally avoidable. Possible car accidents with losing the right-hand turn, the negative flow and effect could be immense. Even jobs lost, unnecessary. Yeah, that shopping centre's been there since the 1960s, the second busiest in town. Happy to support option 2, and not happy about losing the right-hand turn. Thank you.
The Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, interesting conversation, and I'm yet to really decide, to be really totally honest, but I'll make a couple of comments because there has been some comments made, and I agree with Councillor Barrett. Probably the only thing I will agree with Councillor Barrett, to be honest, but design by committee isn't great. It does seem a bit odd, but I would say the traffic engineers haven't made a firm recommendation. That's why we've got two options here. So I don't know where the design panel's saying we're doing this, we're doing that. So I think we've got to get all the facts on the table. The safety aspect it is a concern. We can't say there's no crashes there. Councillor Finlay's right. There is some strange behaviours of going across, lanes of traffic and just risking everything. But I do want to just say, we've got to listen to our business community at times. This council chamber is pretty echoey at times around who pays rates, who actually provides jobs, who actually creates prosperity for this community. And you do have to listen occasionally, and if you've ever been in business or a customer-facing business, it is based on behaviour patterns. You can't deny that. Retail is extremely competitive. Just walk around the place, see the Felice signs. It's really tough. It's probably the toughest it's been, and since I've been in this chamber for the last 10 years. So I just wonder, we just need to listen occasionally. But again, I do understand the safety issues. So I'm yet to be convinced. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Before we go to Councillor Denson, we'll go to Councillor Hancock online because he's been waiting patiently.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I'm actually going to, I won't actually support the motion, and I'd be more than happy to support Councillor Barrett's motion should this fail. This is actually a 4-lane roadway, which of course actually encourages much higher speeds than 2-lane or narrow roads. So there are some inherent risks in terms of maintaining that right-hand turn out of the shops. The businesses that exist here have been well established for many years, and they'll have very established client bases. I think through the questioning we've established very clearly that there are some quite coherent means of exiting the shops without retaining that right-hand turn into Pioneer Highway. People use those shops because they're convenient for them, and they're the types of shops that they need to shop at. So I don't buy the argument that there'll be any loss of clientele or business for those businesses. So as far as I'm concerned, the motion before us is really one of a populist kind of motion, which is not really based on any merit whatsoever. So I'll be definitely voting against. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Denison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually going to put my support for the recommendation before us for these reasons. One is that we can do this in 2 stages. We can put in the crossing and then subsequently make a decision in years down the track if it's put back before us to reconsider the option of limiting the right-hand turn out of that shopping centre. So it's not changing it forever, and the location where it moves down a few metres down the road is in my mind, not such a significant issue. I think through the feedback, I think it's brought forward a really important issue around that car parked space, which is used as a car park, and an entry and exit along Wheat Street. And I think the suggestion that council should formalise that a little bit more is very worthy. So I think either option, I think we need to address that. The other point I want to mention around why do consultation if we're not going to listen to the feedback? And I take the point that we're here for the wider public, but actually we with these businesses a good voice saying they have concerns around this. So why would we not listen? And so I want to take that point on, and that's around the business that the Mayor's outlining too. Business has been tough this last year or 2 years, and so I want to be seen in the Economic Development Committee, Economic Growth Committee, to be seen to be supporting businesses. And so I think that does need to be taken into balance when making this decision. And then lastly, around the confidence around, like the Mayor made a very good point, that it's not like the panel's put a very strong recommendation, it's an either or, and it's left up for the political arm. But when I'm looking at some of the other decisions that we've had to make, there's a real mixed feedback in the public if we are taking the views of the wider community, with the likes of the feedback we had around the proposed Featherston Street intersection. We had mass feedback and many had concerns. And I'm thinking there's proof yet in the pudding of the outcome of that, around how that actually does operate. And so I'd like to see the outcome of that before I start agreeing to any other significant changes around our city, because if that turns out to be really frustrating for our community, I don't want to be creating a further compounding that. Because some of those designs with fair point, without going on to that. And included in my last point, just around this intersection or this traffic light and crossing is for the cyclists and pedestrians. And I acknowledge that. But even when we've done the planter box trial and even since then, the cycle count numbers I haven't observed being like really shooting up. And so here we are making all these changes for business, all these changes for the vehicles, and yet the cycle counts, in my view, have not been, seen as being a real growth indicator to really even warrant some of these treatments that we're putting in. So I'll put that out there too, and for many of those reasons and others, I'm going to support the recommendation before us.
Thanks, Councillor. Right of reply back to Councillor Wood. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor. It's been an interesting discussion. I thought I'd just start by clarifying my Shamrock Street comments. I apologise, Councillor Barrett. My recollection was it was only a one-turn car bay, but you are right, there is more space for this. I'll retract comments from my opening statement regarding making a U-turn on Pioneer. I understand my colleagues' views, and I very much appreciate the conversation we've had, and we'll be interested to see which way this goes. But I want to make a few points. Firstly, to emphasise what Councillor Dennison said, that this gives us future optionality. And so if we find that if we haven't been able to make reasonable safety improvements for this space to be used, and if we have found that there continues to be a significant level of crashes, then absolutely we can do much like what we've done outside Toyota there as you're turning off. I'm trying to recall the name of the street, Tānui, I think it is. Put in balusters where people now can no longer turn right onto Grey Street. So there is, this retains future optionality. Option 1 doesn't retain future optionality. So I think it's better, particularly given the major transport changes we're making around the city, to give ourselves and give future council that option. I want to re-emphasise the point that 5 of the businesses on site opposed it, 2 supported it and 1 was neutral. I reject this view that's often put out in the chamber, which is, well, if I agree with it, then it's listening to the community, and if I disagree with it, then it's populist. That's just nonsense. You can't say, oh, well, it's populist for you to listen, but if I've got 30 submissions in favour of what I'm doing, well, then it's not populist, it's doing what the community wants. So I think we need to move away from that kind of language because it's not productive. At the end of the day, we've done a consultation, and the view and the majority feedback from that consultation is they would like us to retain it, and who knows best? Us sitting here in the chamber, or those who live and breathe that car park and live and breathe that shopping centre every day? Well, I'm inclined to believe the people who live and breathe it and their livelihoods are staked on it. So that's why I'm comfortable supporting this, and I hope the majority of you do as well.
All right, we'll look to vote. Failed, 7 votes to 8. So we'll now look to Councillor Barrett to put up option 1, 1A. Thanks, Councillor. Just give a moment to the administrators, right? If you're happy to. Sorry. You got Councillor Johnson seconding that. Hopefully this won't take much debate. Are you ready? No, are you ready? Thanks, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to go to the vote.
Got Councillor Johnson wants to speak as well.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I did just want to take the opportunity to perhaps put some additional thoughts out about whether this is about who knows best, and whether if we don't do what business wants, we're not listening. And I just want to challenge some of the assumptions that because someone expresses an opinion about the effect that a change will have on the business, that they're automatically right. That's not always the case. We know that whenever cycle routes are proposed, that businesses object because they think that their business will lose customers as a result. But if you look at the evidence is that customer increases. So I think we just need to be wary of taking the view that because business has put forward a certain position, that that's automatically supported by the evidence. Sometimes people will put forward a position that's genuinely and sincerely held, but isn't actually supported by the evidence. So I just would caution assuming that because business says that they'll lose money and that that their business will be adversely affected by a particular traffic change, if that's actually the case. Often the evidence shows quite the reverse, so just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Right, no one else wants to speak? We'll look to vote. Thank you. Right, that's 10 votes for, 4 against and 1 abstention. Thanks, everybody. Right, we'll now move on to item 9. We've got Stacey coming down. It's up there. So, Stacey, that's page 37 of our paper. Thank you, Stacey. Yep, that is. Keep the microphone on. Thank you. Keep it, push it down. Yeah, that's it. Just keep it. Just keep it down.
Thank you, appreciate that. I'm just preparing a presentation. I have plugged it in. Is that all I need to do to bring it through?
Hold on. 1 second.
That looks promising. And kia ora tātou, my name is Stacey Andrews, formerly Stacey Bell, so just letting you know, different name, same person. Thank you for the opportunity to present the annual economic snapshot today. There's a lot of information at the moment, a lot of things going on, so I have tried to make it concise, but I am typically engaged in the detail, so I will try and skip through and just comment on the main factors. So the highlights, we've had really strong population growth, and the diverse mix of public and private sector activity has really shown through in our resilience over the last couple of years, especially with our large public sector, which is less sensitive to economic conditions and cycles and downturn in consumer spending and business activity. However, at the moment, we do know that conditions are tough for households and businesses out there, and we are very much seeing that come through in the data, especially around consumer spending, also around data that we're receiving from the real estate sector, in the sense that demand for retail, land and premises has really fallen away, whereas commercial and industrial still seems to be relatively strong. This weaker demand is expected to flow through to demand this year in 2024, and also impact on job numbers across the community. Inflation is falling, which is great, although it's not falling as fast as the Reserve Bank will like. So it'll be interesting to see the OCR decision at 2 p.m. this afternoon. I very much, my own personal opinion or professional opinion is that it will be unlikely that they will rise. I really hope that they do not. Inflation is moving in the right direction, and the slowdown in the economy hasn't filtered right through to households as yet. So there'll be further slowing regardless of whether they move it or not. What I would expect though is for them to keep the OCR higher for longer due to that sticky core inflation and domestic inflation as well, which they're having a bit more trouble getting on top of. There are some pockets of inflation that remain very stubborn. One of those is the rental costs, which are really rising now as a result of very strong net international migration and the pressure that that is placing on the rental market in terms of supply versus demand. So that's a negative impact of net international migration. There's also been very positive ones in the sense that the inflation that was flowing through from the labour markets is now easing because we have a greater supply of labour to the market. So that's been a very positive impact of the very strong increase in net international migration. There will be challenges in 2024, as we all know. The cost of living remains elevated, even though the rate of increases has slowed. It still remains very elevated for many families, and families are struggling, and we're seeing that through the decline in discretionary spending through our market view data. So the city economy has been in a very high growth phase over the last 5 years, very much driven by our economic structure and also very high levels of investment flowing into the city. So we've really seen the benefits of that. In the third quarter 2023, we came off a very high base, but our economic activity did start to fall away relative to the earlier strength, and that is due to those wider economic conditions. The higher interest rates really pushing down consumption and profitability for businesses and expenditure of businesses in that sense. The private sector in New Zealand across most developed economies contributes about 60% or generates about 60% of total GDP in a country, and that is the same in New Zealand. So when the household sector is under pressure, that flows through to economic activity across the board. Population growth has been extremely strong. So I think to the year end of December, we had 126,000 people come into the country. There was a record 134,400 in October 2023. So very strong net international migration, record levels. Here in the city, we've had a boost from net international migration as well, an extra 1,600 people coming into the city for that reason from net international migration. We've also had a boost in employment across sectors such as nursing and midwifery, which we know really needed that boost after the border closures of 2021, 2022. We've also had a range of other industries benefit as well, such as drivers, machinery operators. So there's been a great demand for workers across all industry sectors, and we've seen the difference that that's made from the borders being open and us able to access labour in that sense. Despite population growth, consumer spending remains very weak. In real terms, it is in the negatives. So we are seeing consumer spending increase at lower than the rate of inflation, or indeed the household living price index as well. So that's one reason that the that the Reserve Bank will be looking at today, saying even though we have this really strong net international migration, actually consumer spending is still very weak for those reasons, which will support them keeping it where it is. Fingers crossed. Record annual business and job numbers. We only had 3 additional businesses added over the year to March 2023, but actually the year before we had 315. So that's up 4.1% over those 2 years, which is very strong. We've managed to maintain those numbers to 2023. Unfortunately, with the data and the fact that there is a lag, we won't see those impacts from later in 2023 flow through to next year's data. What we can say is that there has been additional pressure, especially on our retail and services sectors, so we may see a decline in businesses across those industries, but we'll have to wait and see for the data. Business survival rates, 55.5% over the 3 years. Our survival rates range between 55.5 and around 61.1. It's been an interesting time frame. So that's from new businesses in March 20 to businesses that were started in March 2020 that are still surviving 3 years later. I can't think of a more volatile time to be actually reviewing business survival rates due to the economic conditions, global pandemic, etc. So that would have had an impact on those numbers to some extent. Jobs at record highs, still really high across New Zealand, and that's one thing that the Reserve Bank has been waiting to see ease, the number of jobs. So we have rising unemployment, but still at very low levels historically. But we've never had any more people employed in New Zealand at any one time. Our labour force has grown substantially, partly due to the increase in net international migration. So business investment growth was positive. I've pulled out just the commercial, industrial, farm building growth, just as a matter of interest, because I've been speaking with some people in the industry who have been talking about that commercial, industrial interest is still quite strong in the city, which is very positive to see. So as you see, we did have a weak 2022, but 2023 we did see a rebound, and particularly in shops, bars, restaurants, and warehouse buildings. So that was positive. High earnings and income growth. So like the rest of New Zealand, we've experienced very high earnings and income growth, partly from high employment and also from that very strong wage pressure or wage inflation that's been flowing through. We expect that to ease this year, and I think employers will be very pleased to see that ease this year, and as long as it's alongside flattening inflation, then the wellbeing impacts will be limited in that sense. So the data came out for December, the labour cost index data came out for December at 6.9%. So that's the rate of wage increase over 2023, which is very strong. Public sector was 7.4% and private sector was lower, which reversed the trend that we saw over the pandemic period. A lot of wage agreements came through over that period of time, which drove up the public sector side of the earnings growth. Elevated price pressure will remain in 2023, however, although we are seeing a pullback in producer price index increases across the board. Earnings growth is expected to decelerate this year due to those easing labour market conditions, so less pressure on employers to pay more to secure staff. The housing market is edging upward, and I'm actually really pleased to say that it's edging upward. It's not taking off, because that would also be adding to inflation if it was. So house prices are up 1.8% over the last 3 months, but they're still down slightly over the last year. So we're just seeing that start of a recovery, but it does seem to have turned now with that upward trend. Affordability of saving for a deposit has improved markedly since house prices started to fall. Therefore, we're seeing more first home buyers come into the market. Housing affordability still remains affordable relative to other parts of New Zealand, which is positive for Palmerston North. New dwelling consents did rise over the year, up 7.1%, which is opposite to the New Zealand trend. We've seen quite a different cycle here in terms of dwelling investment, which saw us take off earlier and then come down, and now we are getting annual increases again. Of course, housing supply is very important to the city and something we need to watch this year. As we have more people living in the city, housing supply becomes even more important. As we know, high living costs are weighing on spending across the board. Retail spending growth fell to 3%, well beneath the 5.6% or the 4.6% OCR, and well beneath the 7% household living cost index price for the year. So that shows a real decline in spending. Tourism spending is helping to provide a bit of support to businesses, but still that has nowhere near pre-pandemic pre-pandemic levels at this point, is still recovering from the pandemic levels, and that's partly we're less exposed to international tourism, but that's been quite badly affected by downturns in China, etc. So that is providing support, but it's not making up for it. So those businesses are under particular pressure. And the fight against inflation. So the latest figures came out at 4.9%, between 4.9% and 5% for core inflation. That's the one that the Reserve Bank are really worried about, because that's that underlying inflation that's not influenced by volatile commodities such as energy and food prices. So that's the one that they really want to get on top of. Tradable inflation is quite low, so that's what we import into the country from overseas. So our petrol prices have fallen relative to what they were over the last couple of years with the Ukraine war. Our fertiliser costs, etc., a lot of those costs have fallen away, which is positive, but the non-tradable inflation is very sticky. Part of that is the cost of building new homes, rental prices, even rates increases which are flowing through to households. So there's a lot of factors there that are impacting on that need to still flow through to households and bring that rate of inflation down further. And that's another reason why I think the RBNZ will hold fire on raising the OCR, because this is yet to flow through to households, and they know that those price pressures are going to get even harder for households, and they're moving in the right direction. So what we're watching this year with great interest is the consumer spending and how that's impacting on our business community in particular, looking in particular at that retail and services sector, discretionary spend, labour market conditions to see if our job numbers begin to decline in specific areas, financial stress of households and business. We're seeing personal loan rates increase. Default rates are only increasing slightly and are still positive from a historical perspective, but they are going up. Those pockets of stubborn inflation like rental prices and how that impacts on being able to attract staff to a place like Palmerston North, and also the wellbeing impacts of that. Levels of investment, private and fiscal, we know we've got a good investment outlook. However, we don't know, there are some unknowns at the moment in terms of how the private sector is going to respond to the current wider economic challenges, and also with councils reviewing their LTP spending programs, how that's going to impact on the level of spending overall. So we'll be reviewing that closer to June 30 to get a good idea of what the changes are there. Domestic interest rates, of course, which we'll find out more about today, but there's international factors too that are also influencing our interest rates. I was happy to see the ASB drop the 18-month term by 0.26 basis points yesterday. So that's being influenced by bond yields and factors from overseas, which could well have a positive influence on interest rates paid here. Those geopolitical and international conditions, well, yeah, we can't do anything about those, but they do have an impact on our economy. So it's just something to watch in terms of commodity prices in particular and how that impacts on our business community. All right, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stacey. Are you happy to take questions? Yep. So I've just got one to start, and then we've got a few on the queue. My one is around, you talked about 1,600 international migrants. Are you going to go to that screen? Great. Do we know if there's been any issues around visas and working conditions of those people that have come into our community? Have we had any talk about that in our community about that?
That is an excellent question, and one we should be really trying to get an understanding of. I will talk to Stephanie about that because she's quite heavily involved with the migrant community. So, yeah, it's an important factor to understand. So I will find out more information.
I know that there's talk in other communities around the country.
Yeah,
just
there has been.
wondered if you'd heard anything.
I haven't heard anything. I think a lot of people that come to Palmerston North in terms of foreign internationals is for work within our health sector in particular. So they're not, there would be a proportion of lower skilled workers, but the bulk of the workers that come here are for skilled work, which are less exposed to those type of issues. But I will find out more.
That'd be great. Thank you so much. Let's start off with the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Stacey. Really helpful report as usual, and I quite like the dashboard thing that you've done. I think that's a bit easier to read than the big report you used to produce. A couple of questions. Your commentary on rating agencies having put a negative outlook for the sector. Your view where that's going to go?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
So the rating agencies, the Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and the like, they've just come out with a negative outlook for local government.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that particular subject. I would say that the fiscal position of government and local government at the moment is an area that they will be watching closely. I'll probably do some more reading on that because it's of great importance to us at the rate that we can borrow at. So, yeah, I will find out more about that.
Okay, thank you. One gap here, because I see it all the time, and I do think there's almost two economies going on, is sales and leasing data. And, we've had two major restaurants go to the wall. A number of retailers, the for lease signs have probably tripled around the city. Yeah. Do we have any data just to get an understanding? Because that's a bit of a barometer of what, where things are going with retail, accommodation, hospitality.
We don't have any official data because it has a long lag period on it actually, and because of confidentiality, we don't know what businesses. But what I do tend to do is keep in touch with our valuer community, who are incredibly interesting and provide excellent information. And the latest information I have received from Paul is that the retail sector and food services not accommodation so much, but food services sector are doing it tough, but there's still plenty of interest in commercial and industrial sites across the city. So that was in January I last spoke to him.
Yeah, but they're quite different sectors.
They're very different, yes.
You can't really compare an industrial to a retail shop.
No, I agree.
And that's why I think there's a bit of a gap missing in some of your data.
We have to derive that from anecdotal data, from the experience of people who are working in the industry. So we'll continue to boost that knowledge.
Okay, just my final question on a positive note. Home ownership affordability. Palmerston North sits at 5.5 compared to the national average at 7.1. Where would that put us in terms of cities?
Very affordable, at the more affordable end, yes, absolutely. I can bring that data back for you with a list of all the cities and where we sit, but we are definitely at the more affordable end, if not the most affordable.
All right, thank you.
Apologies for my phone, I forgot to put it on mute. I just had to say that. Right, Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Stacey. A little bit following up from the Mayor's comments around really appreciating the presentation of the report and the format of it. Just interested kind of timing of this, because in prior years we haven't seen acknowledging the annual reports have usually come through CETA, but we haven't really seen these kind of numbers until 6 or 8 months after, February. So just, are we, I guess, how are we able to make that kind of gain in terms of getting these numbers to us so quickly?
Yeah, well, there's various reporting methods we use, so the annual indicators once a year. The issue with this report quite often is that we have data over so many different timeframes, but it's the latest data we have. Like, for example, for lead data, which is our linked employee data sets from Stats New Zealand. They're excellent data sets, but they're always 14-month lagged. So I like to use the latest data, but then fill in with actually what's happened in the meantime, just to build understanding of why it matters, what it actually means. So we do the quarterly report. So the data for December comes out tomorrow. So that will be coming back to you in the April Economic Growth Committee. We're also bringing a structure report at the same meeting, which will also include our carbon intensity emissions for the city, the time series for that, and we also bring sector profiles. So in terms of getting the data out more quickly, is that what you're wanting to see?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. We are also investing in a new dashboard system from Data and Dashboards, which will be automated and updated as the data comes in. So that will be available to you after July 1st. So we're working on that at the moment. So that will roll through that automatic updates that will be available to councillors.
Awesome, thank you. In terms of then being able to draw together an annual picture, is that something that then we can really only do once a year, or is there an opportunity to get an annual summary, but, you know, on 6 monthly or quarterly type of tempo?
I think we do attempt to do that through the quarterly annual updates to give the annual data of how we've performed in various areas over the last 12 months. Certainly, if the presentation of this particular infographic was clearer to you, we could look at doing that for the quarterly as well, if that was beneficial.
Thank you. Might wait till comment, but you can see which way my head's nodding. Just so looking at this report, if I'm reading it right, GDP per capita over the last year has actually dropped. Is that a fair read of the numbers?
It is certainly under pressure. It hasn't. I haven't run the numbers for GDP per capita based on this data. I know that real incomes and disposable incomes are down. The GDP is still increasing.
Indeed, but per capita, the number, the population number went up further than the GDP number. So I'm assuming that means that GDP per capita has actually declined slightly.
I think you are probably right, but I haven't run the numbers, so I'd like to have a look at that because it's all about the percentage of total population versus the percentage of total GDP and how they compare with one another.
Right.
So I will bring that information. It's actually sitting in the structural report. So I can bring that back in April.
Great, thank you. Just finally, Madam Chair, just Stacey would be interested to know the 3-year business survival rates. Like, are we in a position where we can get any insight into why? And especially why we might be differentiated from other regional centres or the national averages?
Yeah, there is a mixture of qualitative and quantitative data that we would use to get a better understanding. So we're going through that process now for the structural report.
Great. Thank you. Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Thanks, Stacey. A really helpful report. I agree, it was great. I just wondered if you had any insight into why the mean household income for Palmerston North is significantly below the mean household income for New Zealand.
Yeah, I actually had a look at that this morning because that's a series that's put forth by Infometrics, so they calculate that. So generally our medium incomes here are less than what they are at the national level, so that would flow through to that data. I note within that data, however, that our growth rate over the last year is higher than the national growth rate, so that's something I'm particularly interested in. But our median income growth rate has been higher than the New Zealand average, so I'm assuming that's because our households are more likely to be in higher skilled occupations because we do have that factor here, but I can't tell you exactly why. A lot of this is just looking at the data and saying this is what I think is happening, but it is very common for our average household income and earnings here to be below the national average because of places like Auckland and higher end places with higher incomes generally.
So is it more about wages being different across the country and wages being lower here?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And then the other question I had was about retail spending. So you were talking about retail spending dropping, but it's basically the rate of growth that's reduced. Retail spending is still increasing, isn't it?
Yeah, I have to watch the way I explain that. So when we talk about real spending growth, we're talking about relative to inflation. So the rate of growth has fallen below the rate of inflation, which implies real spending
terms
decline.
that it's
in real
decline.
terms.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Oh, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Stacey, for another great report. Stacey, just carrying on from what my colleagues have also mentioned on page 43 of the attachment, the data from New Zealand Stats and Earnings and Income dated September 22, but your figures have adjusted to more recent data?
No, those data points are from September 22. That's the latest data we have for LEAD, which includes all sources of income, including self-employment. That's why it takes so long to come through to us.
Wonderful. Next question. That's around what the Mayor was talking about earlier in terms of home ownership affordability. Just looking at those numbers, Stacey, we've got an average house value in Palmy, say 650,000. We've got average household income 120,000. Can we draw from that that average household income would make buying a house affordable?
Yeah, I mean, there's many different measures of affordability. So this is an Infometrics series, the housing affordability series. So they look at the average household price and then they divide that by the average household income, and that gives them their housing affordability rate. So you are correct. There are other ways of measuring it as well, such as mortgage serviceability, which has declined due to rising interest rates, and ability to save for a mortgage, which has improved because house prices have fallen to what they were at their peak and earnings have increased over that time quite strongly. So in that sense, it's more affordable. That's why we're seeing more first home buyers being able to come into the market now. So there's various ways of measuring it, but in terms of looking at our affordability here relative to the national average, we are substantially more affordable.
Wonderful. And last question, the average household income, are we able to put some numbers of actually how many households that's referring to?
That is the difficult part with this data, yeah. It is very much the average. We don't have median household income, which would give us a better idea of range, but it's not actually available to us. So that's all the earnings divided by all the households, and that's the average. So there would be a huge range outside that. We'd have very much a lower range and then higher. Statistics New Zealand data for the latest census will give us a good understanding of what those ranges are, but we don't have it available to us apart from census.
Okay, but we do have the number of households.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stacey. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Finally, Councillor Wood. All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Stacey sort of half answered. I was going to ask about the average annual household income and how that's calculated. So I take it the assumption is that a household income is based off two people living of working age in a house. Is that correct?
Infometrics explanation does not state that.
Okay, so do we have an average number of how many people of working age live in a household in Palmerston North? Is it 1.6 or 2 or 2.3 or do we know?
Again, I'd have to ask Infometrics what assumptions they've used there. They do say that they've used wages and earnings, self-employment data, benefit data, superannuation data, and transfers from central government to calculate it. But I am going to send them an email because I'd like to understand exactly how that's calculated as well.
And so the reason I draw that distinction is the median earnings from salaries and wages for the year ended September 22 is 61,000. But if you take the average household income and assuming there's two people in a house and divided by 2, that would indicate that over the last sort of year we've gone down to 59,000 as an average individual earning in the city. And so I just wanted to get your confirmation that due to the difference in calculations, that's not something you're concerned about?
Difference. Yeah, so the Stats New Zealand series, that's table 37, the Stats New Zealand series, they use, that's a median measure, whereas the average is taking into account all incomes. And because we have some very high incomes within the city, that skews that figure upwards relative to the median.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Finally, the Mayor.
Sorry to jump back in, Madam Chair. Just on that, so there is quite a difference between, I've just Googled average, and it's significantly different to your numbers here. So there is obviously quite a difference between average salary to the mean or median.
Or the median.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And just on consents, and I should have asked this first time round, does our numbers include Kāinga Ora?
For the building, for the new dwelling consents, yes, it does.
Okay.
It comes from Stats New Zealand, which includes all, both Kāinga Ora and council consents that have been lodged, issued.
I'll leave to comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you.
I'll look to move this, seconded by Councillor Wood. So that the that the committee received the report titled The Annual Economic Snapshot, Palmerston North 2024, Attachment 1, presented to the Economic Growth Committee on the 28th of February 2024. So we'll look to go into comment. I'll just start off with my comment first. I just think the dashboard on page 42 and 43 is fantastic, and it'd be great to have these that we can compare to each quarter. So I think that going forward, it's a really good start to have that. My comment around if we could start looking, if we could have a way of starting to look at these 1,600 of those people that are in our community for migration, international migration, it'd be wonderful to get a handle on those people that are here and if they're got in jobs and have got good visas, because that's a really big part of our community, and hopefully we are looking after them well. So that's why my question was about that. But really happy to move this report and think that Stacey has done a fantastic job. And I'll look to others that have looked, and I'll go first to Councillor Barrett. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Stacey, for the report, and very much endorse the Chair's comments around the dashboard being probably the best we've ever seen in terms of being visible and concise and timely. So it's absolutely fantastic to see that. What I would like to see as well, and I realize this kind of gets beyond perhaps what's easily done, but it's really great to know what's happening. What would be helpful is where we can get any insight into why. And sometimes that is more difficult to get than others. We acknowledge that, but it's really helpful if we can connect the what with the why. And if we can start to get some good information about why, we can then start to think about information that helps us think about what we might be able to do through our roles here to get some better outcomes in the long term. That's pretty much what I wanted to say in terms of the overall context of the report. I think there's some really interesting individual observations and details in there, which no doubt others will reflect on, but just wanted to thank the officers for the good work that's gone into bringing the report up to this standard, and look forward to future cycles. Thank you.
The Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Like others, thanks, Stacey, and I do think it's a much better layout. I always found the big long report a bit hard to actually grab the executive sort of summary part of it. But this is very clear and a nice use of the north-facing arrow as well from Palmy. A couple of things. I think look, it just paints a picture of where we are. I mean, we are quite a diverse economy, and I think that's saves us in these more challenging times. Some really good stuff around the home ownership affordability, and we've really got to try and play on that. But I do sense, and I know there's some building people in the room, my data that I'm getting from the sector is our numbers are being masked a bit by KO. So if I could ask for the next one, if we could have some sort of understanding of what that makeup of 424 is, if it's 300 Kaiengora houses and it's only 124 new builds, then we need to know that. And that comes to Councillor Barrett's point about how do we influence that. And the data I'm receiving, it is in that space. So although we have some really good numbers, I think they're getting masked a bit by what is actually happening out there. And then how do we help around that? Is it around consenting? Is it around land? Is it around building costs, etc., etc.? The other factor is, which I don't think people don't take into consideration, is the massive increase in energy costs. And we've just been signalled that we've got another big one coming. Something needs to happen there, because it used to be a little power bill that you paid. Now it's a significant power bill. And I'm not sure if that can be factored in anywhere, Stacey, but energy and just some sort of understanding of what is going on in that sector, because it now has become a big cost for people. The other one was sales and leasing data, and I'm hearing you that it's really hard to get that, but maybe if you can't put it on the dashboard, perhaps there's some commentary on it that we know what's happening. our city centre is hollowing out, and I'm quite concerned about that. And as I said in my questions and some commentary, is there's two economies going. The bigger end of town is doing really well. The industrial and commercial side we know is really strong, and we play a significant role in the national supply chain. But our traditional retailers, our hospitality providers, some that have been going for decades, it's just so hard now. And, you know, with cost of wages, compliance costs, even council sometimes can tip things. So I do think we need some commentary on that. But overall, we're weathering a storm at the moment, perhaps a bit more to come. 2:00 will probably tell us how good or bad that is. But again, thanks, Stacey, it's good to have this data, because it means we're making some decisions with some sort of understanding of what's happening out there. So thank you.
Thank you. No one else wishes to speak, so I'll look to vote. Thanks, everybody. That's passed 15 votes for and none against. So we're going to have a 15-minute coffee break. So we'll see you back at 1:45. Okay, we'll get back started again. We're on item 10, page 45, so we'll have Bryce back in the hot seat. Thank you, Bryce. Thanks, everyone.
Kia ora again, councillors. Look, happy to take this one pretty much as read. There is a little bit of a misalignment of timing, unfortunately, with the very first steering group being held tomorrow. So obviously I haven't been able to provide any updates that might come from that in this paper. So yeah, happy to take it as read and take any questions.
Has anybody got any questions? No? Okay, so I'll look to move this paper. Oh, sorry, the Mayor has got a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Finlay, for your commentary. Bryce, just, and I mean, this is probably a bit of an operational question, but, and it's streets, but it is related to streets to people. So the street trees, who's looking after those down Broadway?
So the whole street tree function is now being coordinated through our Parks and Reserves team. So it's sort of made a slight shift across, so we can take a more consolidated response across the city.
Okay, thank you. We'll go there. Thank you.
Right, we've opened the gate. Now we've got Councillor Dennison.
Thank you. Two inquiries really from a one looking back, one looking forward. One, with the current streetscape that we did with stage 1 and 2 from Plaza to the bus stop, what's the maintenance of steam cleaning that and just keeping the upkeep of that? Because walking down there just the other day, I was just noticing how many drink stains, and it just looks like it needs a lift. And for it being such a recent installation of streetscape, I just want to be mindful when we're rolling out hundreds of, tens of millions, to make sure we're keeping what we're doing well. Do you want to comment around the street keeping the maintenance program?
Yep, I could probably answer that in two ways, which I think is probably appropriate. The first one was around maintenance and upkeep. So we have a regular program in place. Our cleaning team and my property team gets out with a special cleaner to actually clean all of the tiles and dealing with those things. So we have a scheme in place. I guess the second part to that as well is one learning from stages 1 and 2 is around the products we use, and so I think rolling out future stages, that'll definitely be a big consideration of what we do in terms of tile choices and the likes to, I guess, reduce maintenance moving forward, or the need for maintenance as much as possible. The current ones in stage 1 and 2 have probably a higher than usual maintenance requirement, just in terms of what they were made of. So I'm hoping we can take that as a lesson moving forward.
Okay, and lastly, just wider residents have commented to me what's happening with the old post office. Is there anything you can share that you can make public, just as an update around the post office hotel development?
I'm not sure if I can, to be honest. I don't actually think I can give you an update on that. Probably the only comment I would say is in the draft LTP, the next stages have been proposed to time in with that development. So we can basically look to be doing work outside that premises while they're doing some of their work. So we can consolidate all of that stuff together.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett's gone. Okay, great. We'll now look to move this recommendation, seconded by Councillor Wood. Thank you, Bryce, that the committee received the memorandum.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, just in light of some of the questions there, your CBD can be or city centre can be your shop window at times, and I do think council needs to do its bit, and by and large we do a reasonably good job around the cleaning. The street trees, although we do need to do a little bit of work on the street trees down in the planter boxes down Broadway. And also our gardens, and generally our gardens, especially in the square Te Marae Hine, are outstanding. So that's a pat on the back to our gardening, inner city gardening team. But I think landlords need to do their bit too. If you actually start to look around town, there needs to be a bit of investment, just even in the presentation of the people's buildings. So I do think that this group might have sort of maybe on its work program at some time just to beautify the buildings that exist. Don't actually have to wait for a whole lot of earthquake strengthening and wait 5, 10, 15 years. They can give things a lick of paint and a water blast, just to get rid of some algae. And I'm not going to mention buildings, but there's one in particular that could do with a good clean. Just with the old post office, I do know that the sale of the property has gone through, so that's positive. But in terms of when things start and everything, I think the developer will obviously be coming back to us, and I think there is consents have been issued or about to be issued. So, that's probably a progress report at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll look to vote. That's passed for 15 votes for and none against. Thank you, everyone. Right, we're moving to item 11. Just a moment. So, in the first instance, I'm lifting this off the table. I'll look to move that, seconded by Councillor Wood. If we could vote for that to happen so that we can talk to it. That's passed 15 votes for and none against. Thanks, everybody. Right, now we can get you to come forward. Thank you, Bryce.
Kia ora again. So I guess just for clarity, the item you've just lifted off the table was in respect to the bus shelter, not the bus stop. However, in consideration of the submitters' feedback and also looking at some of the matters that were raised through the Safe Systems audit, operationally, we've made the decision to shift the bus stop as well and move it a bit further into Clark Ave as a way to hopefully deconflict some of that immediate intersection where Clark Ave and Amberley Ave meets. A couple of things just for interest's sake that came out of the Safe Systems audit. It did raise some concerns around that intersection in terms of pedestrians crossing and potentially a bit of a blind corner in some circumstances. It did raise a concern, I suppose, around general lighting in the street and in the area as an area that we could consider improving. And it did also provide some considerations to the overall road widths and sight lines and things if you had cars parking on both sides of the road or a bus in there as well. So considering that, as I said, we've made the decision to shift the bus stop in a bit more. A decision around whether we still retain a shelter or look to propose to put a shelter there or not. We've just taken the opportunity to take a bit of a pause on that, where we consider how we could address some of the wider safety issues. If we are going to formalise and put a shelter there, as was originally proposed, then obviously that would trigger the consultation process and no doubt come back to the economic growth hearing if there was an objection to be heard. I guess probably the only other point I'd just make quickly before I go to questions is that the existing temporary stop that is currently in place for the launch of the new bus route next week is still in place, and it will remain in place until such a time that we're able to actually formalise the new stop a few properties down. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, we've got a few coming into the queue. We'll start off with Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to ask a few technical questions. One is on recommendation 3, if it needs to say that council uphold the objection and decide to not proceed, or if this is a different process we're going through rather than upholding the objection.
So that is the wording that we've been using for the rest of them.
Okay.
That is the correct wording.
Thank you. And my other question was regarding point 2, that the Chief Executive will relocate the bus stop. My recollection is this committee doesn't have the power to do that. I just wanted to clarify exactly whether or not that's something our Chief Executive can do, or if that's something that the Chief Executive will seek to consult with Horizons to relocate the bus stop, given it's their network.
So the Horizons route goes down Clark Ave, so we need to give effect to that. You are correct in terms of the delegated authority for a bus stop doesn't sit with this committee. It sits through the Chief Executive and I guess downwards through to the Group Manager of Transport to make that decision.
So Councillor, I'll just answer that. So it is actually noting. So that's what it is, that the committee will note.
Thank you. All right. Well, sorry to question the power of the Chief Executive. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So are you finished, Councillor Wood? Great. We'll go to Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bryce. In terms of relocating this stop, has it been decided where it will be relocated to?
Yes, we're proposing 3 doors down, number 50, which is, I think, about 3 properties down from where the current temporary one is.
So that's on the straight part of Clark Avenue, is it? On the other side of the corner?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the temporary bus stop that's outside this property presently, how long do you anticipate that would be there?
Well, following today, we'll be looking to formalise or instruct our contractor to create the new bus stop. So, look, I would say within the next month, I would expect it to have relocated.
Okay. And then there's a note in 2.4 to say officers will also consider what other safety improvement works could be implemented on Clark Avenue. Will that be reported back to this committee, or how will we have some line of sight over what's being done there?
I mean, it can be presented back to this committee. I guess for this kind of work, typically, I think we would normally use other methods just to keep council informed of what we were looking to do through elected member updates. And
just a memo or something like that. Okay. Well, I would appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bryce. Just interested in what engagement there's been with Horizons around, I guess, responding in a coordinated way to the feedback now, not only from the seniors community, but also from Rangitane about concerns about loss of access for people wanting to use buses along Amberley Ave, and yeah, has there been any conversation with Horizons about reconsidering where we're actually at in this part of the city?
Mindful of only answering our piece of this puzzle carefully, because the actual routes themselves, as you rightfully referenced, are made by Horizons, and I understand all of those parties in the feedback are responding directly to Horizons and raising those concerns, including Rangitane, as I understand. I think with all of the routes and the stops and the locations, we've been having constant and regular dialogue with Horizons around that to make sure, A, we're able to line things up, B, we have the official launch on Monday, so making sure that we had the appropriate infrastructure in place for that. So in a more wider sense, yes, we've been having a lot of conversations with them for those points themselves. Yeah, we have had, I know that all parties are aware of those concerns, and I understand, emphasis on understand, Horizons are working through them themselves.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Thank you, Bryce. I just wanted to know with regards to 2.3, when we say that the existing location will then be decommissioned and the area made good, do we have a standardised approach to our notion of made good?
Yep. The definition is essentially of make good is putting it back to the way it was. So as part of that temporary stop, not only have we put up a bus stop pole, but we've also created that 1.8 metre strip for accessibility. That will all be removed and it'll be taken back to how it was before.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. There's no further questions in the queue. Thank you, Bryce.
Bye-bye.
I'll look to move recommendations 2 and 3. Second, Councillor Wood. Okay. There are, yes, I'm just going to say I think this is the most sensible thing to do with this one because of the safety audit that was done. But Councillor Johnson would also like to speak. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I was just going to say very much the same thing, that I think that this is a sensible and pragmatic approach, and I'm sure that the residents that live on that little stretch there, the neighbour, I think to 85, had already put in an objection for the previous bus stop, so I'm sure they will be happy with this as a decision. And I think just in terms of safety, it never made any sense to me to have a bus stop around a very sharp corner and on a junction. So safe systems audit aside, a common sense view of this would certainly have said that it looked a strange place to have a bus stop. So I think the right outcome has been determined, and I'm happy to support these recommendations. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just really wanted to put a view across around why this has had some extensive consultation from the Regional Council with the new routes. It's certainly come through in the media recently that some of the residents are actually left quite vulnerable as far as their distance now to a near bus stop, and really wanted just to really put voice into this decision, even though it's not so related. But the wider issue is that there is some new routes that have been reinstated, and there might be, after next week when they all change again, some more voice that comes out from the community around realising how far they are away from a near stop. And so just really wanted to put, as I mentioned, voice back in for those residents that are regular users that will that may find themselves out at some distance. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Okay, we'll now look to vote. That's passed, 14 votes for and none against. Thanks, everyone. We'll now look to the work schedule, page 51, and I'll ask the Chief Planning Officer to comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only comment I'd like to make is in relation to item 3, the draft or the parking framework. So that was being finalised, ready to come to this committee but the decision was made to hold it back for two reasons. One was there was an identified need for some further internal engagement with affected parts of council. And the second was I was conscious that it is a direction-setting exercise, and while there was a council workshop early in its development, there'd subsequently been engagement with stakeholders, and we wanted to circle back to elected members before it then came into the chamber. So I now need to connect with the Mayor and Chief Executive as to whether or not that will be circulated in a written form for feedback, or whether we will schedule a briefing to go over that parking framework before it then comes to the committee and goes out for consultation.
So just a question on that. You've got a date of the 24th of April. Will that be the date it comes to the committee or go out for consultation?
That'll be the date it comes back to this committee.
Or going out for consultation?
It'll go out for consultation a date after that, which would have to be determined and would have to look at the LTP and other things that are going on. But it would obviously be after it can only go out for consultation after it's been to this committee.
Do we know what type of consultation will go out with this?
We anticipate, and this was talked about at the workshop, we anticipate that it would be a full public consultation exercise.
Okay, thank you. We've got a few questions. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to understand, in regards to the Palmerston North Airport Limited, when we've posed the discussion around the shareholding and expanding that for further investment, can I understand, will that be progressed through the statement of intent or their 6 monthly updates, or would we expect that to be a separate item, understanding that Council's made the decision to put that back into Palmerston North Airport Limited's hands to progress that work? I just don't want to lose sight on it. Can we get comment on how we might see that being progressed and when we can expect reports accordingly?
Through the Chair, more than likely see that come back as a separate report.
And back through you, Chair, can I understand the time frame we might expect that? Is that 3 months or 6 months down the track, or just indicatively?
The 24th.
It's through the Chair. So the airport company are now driving that piece of work. So I'll just need to check in with them as to how that's progressing and their timeframes before I could give an answer.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, CE.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wondered what the significance of some items being in red was. So items 9, 10, 11, 18 and 24 are in red.
It's the first time this committee has seen they're on the word schedule. Just found that out. I didn't know either.
I can't hear you, sorry.
So it's the first time this committee has seen that they're actually on the work schedule.
Oh, I see. So if it's on red, not crossed out, it's the first time it's appeared. Okay, thank you for that.
Great question. Any other questions? It's going to be quite a big committee next time. We're not going to get away with being out by lunchtime. No other questions? Okay, we'll look to move that. And seconded by Councillor Wood. And we'll look to vote. Oh, I didn't ask for comment. That's passed 15 votes for and none against. Thanks, everybody. That's our time for today. Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair, o tira tēnā tātou. Kua mutu a mātou mahi mō tēnei wā. Our work here is finished for this moment. Manaaki tia mai I a mātou katoa. Good health and blessings upon us all. O mātou hoa, o mātou whānau. Our friends, our colleagues and our whānau. Ai o ki te rangi. Peace to the universe. Kia ora koutou.